you don't realize that neurologically, they haven't even heard you or been able to process what you're asking of them. And so for me, it was like this giant weight, like I had been saying for so long, and no one would believe me. Something was not right. And all of a sudden, I was validated, and not only validated, but given this beautiful path because I was surrounded by supportive people who were educated. Hi, everybody. I know you don't usually get to see my face, but today I felt inspired to film something. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and as Blake's birthday has been quickly approaching, I kind of just decided to pull the trigger and get on screen and record some thoughts. I have had this image in my mind of writing down Blake's birth story and all of the ways that his entry into this world has affected me, my being, my energy, my place in the world, all of the above. I would say that that little boy came into this world with a bang, and every day is reminiscent of that. So part of this is for my own personal healing, and part of it is because I know that I am not alone in my experience as Blake's mother. And I would love if anybody watching this is to get just a piece of camaraderie, understanding, a sense of not being alone, then I would love to be able to be the one to provide that. And I think that words have always had this like amazing healing power for me in my life. I'm a big reader, and I just hope that mine can help make a difference for somebody else who might be going through something similar or have maybe experienced something similar during their time as a mother or as a father as well. So a lot of you already know Blake is turning 8 tomorrow, which is absolutely crazy to me. There were moments when I didn't even think I was going to get through the next 4 hours of our day, let alone 8 years. So looking back at where we were and where we are now is just pretty astounding. And to be honest, I am really proud of all of us, our whole family. So Blake is our first child, and he was born on February 12th, 2012. He was about 4 days late. Yeah, he was due on the 8th, and he must have been snug as a bug because he didn't want to come out. And we were so excited to meet him. We had tried for a year to get pregnant, which at the time seemed like forever, but now I realize was truly a blessing for us that we did not have to wait any longer than that for our journey to start as parents. But I remember those last few days leading up to his due date, I was just so excited and so ready to meet him. I felt like I was prepared as could be for motherhood. I was terrified about giving birth, but I knew that I'd get through it. I had no illusions of wanting to do it naturally. I was definitely a proponent of, the drugs. I was not afraid of that, which is really funny because my amazingly strong, beautiful sister has had all natural births, and I still to this day have no idea how she has done it or how all of you amazingly strong women who have had natural births do it. I am just in awe of all of you and in awe of the crazy things that our female body is capable of. So I had always had Braxton Hicks, and I just kept hoping and hoping, let this be the real thing. So finally we go to the hospital, and they were like, you're not really in labor enough to where we want to admit you, but stick around, walk around, maybe something will happen. So we did. And after, gosh, I don't even know how long of walking around the hallways, we made some progress. So I got to stay. And labor was long. It took a long time to get fully dilated, and I got Pitocin, all of that. I think in all it was maybe 17 hours, if not a little longer than that. But I remember not knowing at all what I was doing. So I really relied on the amazing staff and my amazing OB to guide me through the process. And I don't remember like any of the discomfort at this time, which is so funny, right? That's why women continue to have babies, because we get like amnesia around it. But my biggest memories surrounding Blake's birth start with pushing. And everything was going normal. And then all of a sudden, alarms started going off. And the doctor said, something's wrong. The baby's heartbeat is plummeting, and we need to get the baby out now. And I obviously was panicked. She's like, I really need you to get this done in the next like push. And I was like, I don't even know what that feels like. I think I'm pushing. I feel like I'm making progress. I don't know what's happening. And so I did my best with an amazingly supportive partner by my side. And all of a sudden, the doctor says the cord's wrapped around his neck. And from what I can see, there's this baby that doesn't quite look like a baby because he's not responsive and he's gray. And in that moment, I thought I had lost my child. I thought maybe I had done something wrong and not pushed hard enough, and I didn't hear that cry. So that's the moment that every mother and father dreads. I don't know if that was just me because I had worked in a hospital and I was aware of all of the things that could go wrong during birth, but that was my worst nightmare. And I thought in that split second, as they were calling the code team to come in for the baby, and alarms are going off, and I don't hear anything but silence. And I look at Brian, and he's trying to keep me calm, but he's trying to see what's going on. And they let him, I don't even remember, I have to ask him, but I think they let him cut the cord like really quickly, which how amazing is that they even were able to make that happen in an instant. And then they took the baby. I still didn't know what was going on. All of this happened so quickly. So they took him and they had to do vacuum suctioning and resuscitation, and they were able to get him to start breathing. What was probably like, a minute or so of him not breathing felt like a lifetime. All I could think of was, what am I going to do if I don't get to go home with my baby? And then he cried. And it was just a little cry, but it was a cry. And Brian just said, he's okay, he's okay, he's okay. They told us that they needed to take him to the NICU. And I just felt empty, is the only way I could describe it. They handed him to me, and we have this picture of him laying on my chest, and he has this bubble coming out of his mouth. And I'm looking at him in awe and in confusion. Everything had just happened so fast. I was so tired. I just remember feeling exhausted, and I felt empty. I didn't feel that immediate connection that people always talk about. And I was scared, and I just had no idea why that had happened the way that it had. Obviously, the birth to happen like that was not at all our plan or something we had even considered. And they let us know they needed to take him to the NICU to check him out. And so my sweet husband, of course, didn't want to leave me, but I told him he needed to go with the baby. And so he did. So I am alone in the delivery room for what felt like forever. And Brian was able to FaceTime me. The doctor was able to stitch me up, get me cleaned up and ready to wait for our bed to open so we could go up to a room. And Brian FaceTimed with the baby and was saying how he was holding onto his finger and was so strong. And I could just tell that Brian had that immediate connection with him. And Brian talks about how when Blake was upset and he heard Brian's voice, it was just like an immediate comfort. And the two of them connected, and it was immediate and beautiful. But I finally got taken upstairs to my postpartum room, and again, still haven't been able to hold my baby for more than maybe 30 seconds and hadn't really met him. I felt like I had no idea who this little person was. And as a first-time mom, it was terrifying. Everybody, the nurses were talking about making sure that I was pumping breast milk because they wanted to be able to feed him that. And I had never breastfed, hadn't pumped, hadn't even been able to hold my baby yet. And he ended up feeling, or not feeling, obviously he was a newborn, but he ended up like just doing really well. All of his vitals, thank God, went exactly to where they needed to be. He appeared as if there had not been any birth trauma at all. I mean, this child had not been breathing or moving. And then we found out that he had ingested meconium, which, for those of you that don't know, is really dangerous and can even lead to death. So all of these things combined, it's kind of a miracle that they didn't see any lasting issues at that point. So finally, I feel like this had to have been, by the time Blake was born, it was really early in the morning. I just remember starving, and I'm pretty sure the cafeteria was closed. And so fast forward to like 9:30 in the morning, and they finally bring him to me. And I just was in awe of this baby, but I didn't feel like he was mine at all. I didn't. He was like this tiny, long, he had these little crinkly ears just like his dad. And he was beautiful, but he didn't feel like he was mine. And of course, we had trouble breastfeeding. And I feel like things have changed a little bit, but especially at that time, everything was breast is best. If you're not feeding your baby breast milk, you're doing him like a disservice. There was just so much pressure I felt from the nurses and even the lactation consultants. Like, don't try formula, make this work, make this work. And he would just cry, and he didn't want to latch, and everything hurt and was so painful. And I was so exhausted. And I remember thinking, like, I just need to sleep. And I just felt like I couldn't function at all. I was scattered. This was kind of like the beginning. And looking back, if just one person in the hospital had said, you've been through a very traumatic event, let's take your baby for a minute, like mommy needs to sleep, get her some sleep, I feel like I would have been able to process a little bit differently. I had not slept at all by this point, and I'm like guilting myself over the fact that the baby's not latching, and I just felt like I was failing. My child almost died during delivery, and then I couldn't even feed him. And, I was just so beyond tired. That's all I can remember. So fast forward, we finally get out of the hospital, and what felt like literally a week, and by the time we were discharged, it was like a total of 3 days, but it felt like a week. And we bring him home, and Brian and I decided, okay, we need to get some formula. We're going to try, because I just was a mess, not functioning. He wasn't latching, and he was so hungry. I feel like that child was just a hungry baby. So we went immediately to Babies R Us and got more supplies after taking him home and I pushed it. I did not rest. I was on my feet. I did not take care of myself. I just pressure, constant, trying to make sure that everything was taken care of. I was worried about the house and laundry, the dumb things that you're not even supposed to worry about. I think looking back, because I felt like I didn't have a hold on being a mom, I felt like I had this baby that was crying all the time. I didn't feel like I could console him. There would be times when he was crying and I would just be crying because I didn't know what else to do. And all I could think of was that literally everybody else around him seemed to be able to do something. And I felt like I couldn't do anything to make him feel better. And so I think that I went overboard just trying to do everything else. And maybe that made me feel like at least I was doing something, because I felt like I was failing at the one job that I had. And after a few weeks went by, I think it was obvious that I was not okay. I would have this like anxiety that would build and build anytime he was sleeping. And part of it is, I think, something that happened in that hospital, like being so exhausted and not being able to catch up on sleep, started this pattern for me of anxiety around sleep. And so he would sleep, and everybody says, sleep while the baby sleeps. But I was so anxious about being woken up because I was so tired that I couldn't sleep. I would just sit there and think about, he's going to wake up. He's going to wake up, because he never slept consistently. And he was the baby that couldn't fall asleep on his own. He had to be in a swing. He had to be held. He had to be rocked. He needed constant movement. And he was so fussy. And finally, after lactation consultants coming to the house, I just gave up on breastfeeding, and it felt like such a failure. I tried to pump. I tried everything that everybody recommends, and I just felt like nothing worked. I was a basket case, and I wasn't sleeping. And every time he would sleep, I just remember that anxiety of like, he's going to wake up any minute. And then what am I going to do? The only thing that made me feel better was being out of the house. So I would pack him up and we'd go for drives. I would go walking at the mall, anything to get out of the house, because my anxiety would be less. And finally, my husband had kind of a heart-to-heart with me, and my family, I know, was worried. And we decided to talk to my OB about postpartum depression. And I think at that point, it was really obvious to all of us that that's what I was going through. But it felt, that in and of itself felt like a failure, which I would never put on another mom at all. I would never, ever feel that way. But one thing that has always been true of myself is that I am incredibly hard on myself. And to me, just even struggling in any way felt like a failure. I just thought in my head, like I was going to be an awesome mom and it would just come naturally. Why wouldn't it? Like, I've always been around kids and like taking care of them. And this was my baby. Like, why would it be hard? So it's hard now. I think I have guilt looking back, because I feel like I missed so much of that beautiful time with him in the beginning, because I was so tired and so stressed out, and I put so much pressure on myself. But the whole time, even though people would say, it's okay, you're struggling with depression, and I knew that that was affecting kind of my processing and how I was bonding with the baby, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right with Blake. And I can't even tell you exactly what it was that I was feeling then, other than it was this instinct, which is so funny because I guilted myself so much for not being connected to him. And I look back now and I realize that I knew that baby more than anybody else did. And I had no idea that that's what I was feeling. There was something going on. And as Blake got bigger, we struggled. We struggled with him just not wanting to sleep, really not having like a good napping structure. I had to end up being one of those moms. I like Googled every sleeping method, every book, everything. And I found this amazing website, which I will link. And it may have changed the name. So if it has, I apologize, but it was Precious Little Sleep at the time. And it was my saving grace when it came to sleep. Blake had to be sleep trained and we had to do everything in steps. And so it went from him falling asleep and sleeping, literally sleeping in a swing, to then eventually being able to be rocked to sleep and put down. And then eventually we had to wean him from being rocked. And everything was just a process. And everything felt like a big mountain that we were climbing. So at that point, we, had been several months now, even fast forward to like when he turns a year, we start, getting past some of those things, but then like the sleep things, and he's at least on a routine now, but he throws fits. And it's funny because looking back, I see things that I didn't see at the time, but I just had this feeling like there's these fits, this emotion, these things that I'm seeing in him still don't feel right. But people would say, oh, he's just so smart. He's bored. He just everything. Everybody had an opinion about why I had a fussy baby. Sometimes babies are just fussy. Even the doctors were amazing and supportive of me, but told me there's nothing wrong. Like there's no lasting damage from what happened during your child's birth. And I believed that. And I didn't push. I didn't insist that something wasn't quite developing as expected because I didn't have the experience and I didn't have the confidence. I was a mom who had postpartum depression, who was trying so hard and who was having these feelings about her child, but I was being told I was a first-time mom and I didn't know any better. So, Blake keeps getting older and we still are having these issues with tantrum. He was the kid that was like a bulldozer everywhere we went. He's like a bull in a china shop and things get touched. There was no like impulse control, which now I know the words for that. I didn't know that at the time. And then we noticed that Blakey would do these funny things where we used to call them like he'd get stuck in a cycle, like, oh, Blake's stuck in a cycle, a rotation, and he would touch a wall, move a car, walk around the living room and tap the door. And then he would do it all again. And it's like, oh, how cute, how funny. Well, that's not something that neurotypical kids do. And I didn't know that at the time. All these little things, right, keep adding up. In the back of my mind, I'm still feeling like, gosh, like I feel like my child is hard, but every mom feels that way. I joined a mom's group and they were amazing and supportive. And I met some incredible moms and like didn't fit in. And I thought, well, he's younger than the rest. Everybody else's kids were kind of like toddler, almost preschool age. He had so much energy bouncing off the walls. And we had to be so careful because he would be the kid that would hurt other kids, and not intentionally, but he just would be so rough in how he played. And he had no idea that it could be painful. He loved to walk in rocks without his shoes on or his socks on. He would throw himself down on the floor and he would bonk himself into walls and furniture and anything to get that hard sensory input. I had an amazing friend. Well, she's an amazing friend now. At the time, she was my counselor that I started seeing for my depression. And she just listened. And one day she said, there's this book I want you to read. And there's this thing called sensory processing disorder. And some of the things that you're telling me about your son and why parenting is so difficult just resonate. And maybe you should read this book. And so I read the book and I'm like, wow, this is Blake. This is Blake. This is Blake. And then I read more into the book and I learned that there's a really high correlation between kids who have sensory processing disorder and kids who are on the autism spectrum. And I thought, no, my kid can't be on the autism spectrum. I know, I've heard about autism. That's scary. That's not something that I'm equipped to deal with. There's no way. Mm-mm. And then I did some more research and I talked to some more people and I realized, wow, Blake has some repetitive behaviors. He's pretty anxious at bedtime. He asks us the same questions every night. And if we don't answer them, then he has a meltdown. He can only sleep if he has his noise machine and his special nightlight and his special stuffy, and everything has to be a certain way. And then the littlest changes in our routine can cause him to have a kicking and screaming tantrum. Wait a second, he's having trouble making friends with other kids. He's really rough. He seems to do things to our animals that cause like a response and doesn't understand if they're hurt. But he's like the most loving, sweet, intelligent, funny boy. But sometimes he gets this blank look on his face. And I realized that he was like a textbook. Check, check, check. Did he stim? Yeah, he stimmed. But we didn't see it as stimming. We didn't know that he was stimming because to us, the way that autism had been portrayed, everywhere in the media, which is really my only experience with it at the time, was kids who need to flap or make sounds repetitively. And he didn't do any of that, but he did other things. And so for me, having this realization and deciding that we needed to, have our child evaluated didn't feel as scary as I thought it would. As soon as things started clicking and I started realizing, wow, there's supports that are in place to help kids, that I can get him into OT, I can work with him on behaviors, we can talk about anxiety, and we can figure out how to make him feel safer. And all these little things about his behaviors that I struggled with. Because the thing is that a lot of kids who are on the autism spectrum, especially kids who ultimately end up being high functioning, which Blake is, a lot of their early behaviors look like bad behavior. And that's so dangerous and so scary because it can be completely overlooked. It is a kid who jumps off of furniture, who can't keep his hands to himself, who interrupts constantly, because Blake has ADHD also. And it looks like a kid who you've told to stop doing something, but they keep doing it over and over. And you think, well, they're just ignoring you. You don't realize that neurologically, they haven't even heard you or been able to process what you're asking of them. And so for me, it was like this giant weight, like I had been saying for so long, and no one would believe me. Something was not right. And all of a sudden, I was validated, and not only validated, but given this beautiful path because I was surrounded by supportive people who were educated, and my amazing counselor was one of them, who were there to guide me. It just wasn't so scary anymore. And now looking back, I have this brilliant boy who loves people and animals and friends, and he wants so badly to be accepted and to be seen, just like all of us. He's no different than any of us. And he struggles. He struggles with anxiety. He struggles with knowing whether or not he's doing the right thing in certain situations. He struggles with thinking that he's trying to be funny and not hitting quite right. He struggles with people not being able to always handle his big energy because everything's bigger. His feelings are bigger. His heart is bigger. His sad is bigger, but his love is bigger. His excitement is so pure and so deep and so beautiful to witness. And in so many ways, he is my little miracle because he might not have survived his birth, but he did. He's a fighter and he shows up every day with determination, and he inspires us and shows us how to accept other people. It's funny because this year we finally got him enrolled into the Autism Academy here in Phoenix, and that school and his teachers and all of the staff there have just been such a blessing, such an amazing blessing in his life. And he talks about the struggles that other kids that he knows go through, and he does it with such acceptance and love. And he talks about how everybody in life struggles with things, whether you're neurotypical or not. We all have our issues. I think that part of becoming an adult is realizing that. Only he's had the opportunity to realize that a lot sooner. And I think that that provides an understanding of humanity that a lot of us weren't fortunate enough to get until a much, much later age. And so because of that understanding, he's just so much more patient. But it doesn't always translate at home with his sister. But in moments where she's feeling different or afraid, he's able to step up and be the strong one and be that big brother. And I guess I want this to be a celebration of all of the beautiful things that Blake is, the complicated, beautiful boy that he is. And I know that he was put in this world to change it. And I believe that that's what he is going to do. And my message to all the parents that might see this, follow your gut. Don't let anybody convince you that they know your child better than you do. Your trauma is your trauma, and only you can decide if something was that traumatic experience for you. Don't let people tell you that something was smaller than it is. This is really the first time that I've even been able to talk about Blake's birth. We brought a couple of things, as most first-time parents do, to the delivery room. I brought, at the time, we really loved listening to Imogen Heap, and there was this specific CD that was popular back then. And I listened to it during my labor. And then years went by, literally years, something that I listened to over and over and over again before Blake was born. And then I never listened to again. And it took me probably until maybe a year ago to realize I stopped listening to that because the music brought me back to that delivery room. I couldn't listen to it. I would have this visceral reaction, this nausea that would just happen immediately. And it's because of my trauma. I went through a traumatic event and I couldn't have anything that reminded me of it because I was in the weeds still. And we still don't know why some people develop autism, why some people seem to be born with it, why some people seem to have it happen later on. But regardless of what causes it, I can say that I'm grateful for it because I think that this world needs people who can show that difference is okay. I think we need to be challenged. I think that there's beauty in being direct, in saying what you think, in not always knowing how to act. We all feel the same way. Like, let's just make it okay. Let's just make it okay to feel a little weird in social situations. Let's make it okay to be honest. Let's make it okay to have a completely straight face when you're in a roller coaster and then get off looking like you had the worst time of your life and then go, that was so fun. Because that's what Blake does, and it's beautiful. Everyone is different. I would never want my child to be anyone other than who he is. And he's not Blake, the autistic kid. He's just Blake, who happens to be on the autism spectrum, but it's a part of him and it's a beautiful part. And I'm so happy that he chose me to be his mommy. If you have any questions about raising a child with special needs, in particular, a child who might be on the autism spectrum, might have problems with sensory processing disorder, maybe generalized anxiety disorder, any and all things, and you need some support or you have some questions or need resources, please reach out. Please know that you're not alone, and please trust yourself. You know your child the best, and if you need someone to walk alongside you during your journey, there are so many amazing people who are willing and able to do that for you, because you should never, ever feel like you have to go through it by yourself. That is not something that anybody deserves. And it's honestly just not necessary. It's not the truth anymore. There's an amazing community of people who are just honestly angels on this earth. So if you have happened to watch through this entire thing, thank you. You can also feel free to share with me any of your birth stories, how crazy or beautiful they may be. I would be happy to hear them. So, as Brian says, be great, be you, and hug the people that you love a little bit tighter today. And most importantly, happy birthday to my beautiful boy.